Welcome to the Sustainable Energy, Sustainable Homes seminar series. My name is Chris Wilson. I'm the program manager with the U.S. Green Building Council Idaho chapter. Hey Scott, how you doing? Welcome everybody and to our viewers out there. This is an interactive seminar. I know remotely you can feel isolated, but please chime in with your questions and we'll do your best to answer those in real time, and that goes for everybody in the room as well. Quickly about the facilities. In years past, we've used the restrooms to my left, which are through the Integrated Design Labs laboratory space, and because of the sensitive equipment in there, they've asked us to use the restrooms that are out this door, a little bit further journey, but they still work and they flush and it's all good. This seminar series is in its 8th year, I believe. Josh Bogle and Steve Howe have been the godfathers and have launched it and have babysat it for years, and they're still very interested in being involved, but they don't want to take care of all the logistics. So U.S. Green Building Council Idaho chapter is now doing a lot of the operations and struggling a bit with the microphones. But we've added the online presence this year, so now people that are not here at this physical space can join us as well. So welcome to those of you outside. This seminar is about home energy retrofit, a deep energy retrofit, standard home, 1980s home from the Treasure Valley. You know, building stock like that exists all throughout the state, so there's nothing special about this. This is something that anyone can undertake. And Jerry Peterson will present that portion of the program. Jerry is the HVAC and Energy Program Manager with the Idaho Division of Building Safety. So not only does Jerry work in HVAC and energy, he's also undertaking this project in his own home. And of course he did it in a very calculated and documented fashion, which we can all benefit from, because he'll tell us how he did it, how much it cost, which steps he took. Specifically, he's got it very well documented. So he'll take us through that. First, Josh Bogle with Green Remodeling is going to take us over the 7 basic steps of home energy or energy efficiency remodels. And this is information that he's gleaned throughout his years of being a green remodeling contractor. And before we launch into their topics and presentations, I want to quickly run through our sponsor list here and thank everyone who's supported this series. And we'll just have these in alphabetical order, so everybody gets represented. We've got A1 Heating and Air Conditioning. We've got Better Homes for 40 Degrees North and Avant Properties. That's Holly Knowler's brokerage. We've got the Boise Weekly, which helps us put the word out and produce our advertising. We've got Building Energy Inc., which is an energy rating firm. They also, I believe, do third-party certifications of third-party certifications, so to speak. So they train and oversee other raters. This Construction is a Boise-based builder that does a great job with natural building techniques and energy-efficient building. Franklin Building Supply is a statewide building supply company, new sponsor this year. And I apologize if I've run through anyone who's here. Jeff, did you want to say anything? We have a representative from Franklin here in the room, and Holly, did you want to say anything about Better Homes and Garden? We have some representatives. Some of our sponsors are here in the room today, so that's great. Flying Cowboys, we've got Goldie in the room. They're a design build company. Hi, Goldie. Thanks for being a sponsor. Gravitas is a design company here in Boise. Green Remodeling, that's Josh Bogle's company. He's going to tell us, he's going to give us a lot of information today, so you'll see him in just a bit. Idaho Power, one of the state's largest utilities. Johnson Brothers, Windows and Doors. Osprey Building Performance, we've got Irwin in the room. Thanks, Irwin. Renewable Energy Solutions, that's Stephen Howe's business. Solar Cascade, sponsor. Thank you, Dave. We've got the Integrated Design Lab. That's the physical space we're in. They provide us this classroom and the audio-visual technology. And the Green Building Council Idaho chapter, that's us. We're coordinating and convening the event. So with that, we're going to jump right into Josh's presentation, and Josh is going to take it away.
But I have to somehow make sense of this stuff now?
Well, we have to transfer the microphone for the folks that aren't here in the room.
Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
And if it just clips, that's fine.
It works.
Okay.
Probably higher though.
Okay. I'll take all the AV hints, and there are little marks on this thing, and I'm going to assume they do something, and we'll figure out what they do or not. So over the past 6 or 7 years, as Steve and I have been trying to, sort of get this, series off the ground and presenting for different people, one of the topics that has come up fairly regularly, we've done it not every year, but almost every year, is a case studies project, is case studies of existing homes and things you can do to existing homes. Great. I think it's really wonderful that we have Mr. Peterson here to sort of give us the deep dive on a specific. So that's great. What I'm going to do to set him up is just sort of talk about the basic overview of issues, of things, if you're trying to make a home more sustainable, what it is you need to do. Sort of in the high level and the easy way, because it's easy in the deep dive to get lost in the details, and so to have sort of a skeleton and a framework first, our hope was that would be helpful for everybody. Oh, that's the one that goes the wrong way. Hey, I'm learning. And some of this, I'll admit, is from a 2-hour presentation, and so I may choose to skip, but I'll hold for, I mean that idea of when we talk about doing something sustainably, the home, that there's a lot of different ways you can take it. But I'd like to, this is the study I found a while back that was done by the University of Michigan. And what they did is they were looking specifically at the carbon footprint of a couple of different homes. And the idea of if they took a standard build home in their area, and then they took and built a home of that same size, essentially same shape, and built it as a net zero home, what would its energy cost be? What's the difference in its in the life cycle energy costs over 50 years? They gave themselves a 50-year window. They said, okay, a building's going to last, the home's going to last 50 years. Now, I think that's a little bit of a crying shame, because built well, a home should do better than that, although we all know that there are a lot of homes built today that have components that don't actually even last the life of the first mortgage. But well built, there's no reason for a home cared for not at all. And so what these graphs represent is gigajoules of energy over the lifetime of the buildings. And so this was the home over 50 years, the one that was built to net zero. The interesting thing is that the purple down here is the amount of energy involved in the materials and the transport of materials to build the house. And so I think this is an interesting lens to sort of look at sustainability through, is to realize that the amount of energy that a home consumes over its lifetime really dwarfs what it takes to build it up front. And I think that goes, really to the core of why, when Steve and I first said, we're thinking about the Sustainable Energy, Sustainable Homes series, what is it about these two issues, homes and energy, and where they dovetail? If you, web link there, if you want to do, again, the deep dive and see all the details that are on that, but that was just quickly. So, tried to simplify it to the big 7 in no particular order. I actually kind of lie there, because the first thing that matters, and anybody who does home rating of any sort will tell you that you need to get a home airtight. If you don't plug the holes, then the breeze is going to blow through, and it doesn't matter if you have huge insulation. If then there's a hole there, it just doesn't matter. That is absolutely. And a way I like to describe it sometimes is, that polar fleece you have, which you love, which is cozy except on windy days. It's a lot of insulation, but it's not airtight. And that's something that And that air tightness is a bigger issue in homes. And then there's just some pictures in here. It doesn't have to be pretty. It might involve a bunch of caulk and foam, and you kind of do whatever you have to do to get it there. I mean, these are places where we've worked where we're just doing a little area, and it's not worth bringing in the truck that does the fancy spray foam. And so you take what you have, put it in there, caulk it in, make sure that that building is airtight in the build. And then just understanding all the places that air leaks through. Any place where, there's a hole in the wall, hole in the ceiling, there's a potential for air movement there. I've been involved in blower door tests on homes where you could hold your hand in front of the electrical outlet and actually feel two little dots and a big dot. It was flowing through, at that rate. Because the air is following the holes that are in the studs from up in the attic, going through those, down through the stud channels and out. Can lights. Anybody who does home energy will tell you it's a classic hole in the ceiling. Needs dealt with. Second up, thick walls. There's a point wherein your insulation value is capped by how thick your wall is. So I actually don't remember now how thick I think it was a double 2x4 stud wall in that University of Michigan study, but is it? And and so there becomes a point at which, okay, you've done airtight, now I need some insulation. And you can only do so much insulation without beginning to thicken walls. And there's different ways to do that. We've dealt with it before where we've put insulation in an existing home over the outside, added certain amounts of rigid foam. That's a little cross section of what was going on there. Double 2x4 stud wall. I think that's a good way. A little cross section of then what that looks like to allow you to get to thickness. Building smaller. That's something that we've seen, I've seen it again and again as people wanting to really bring their energy footprint down. One really easy way is to build or design in such a way that spaces function in multiple ways, and so you don't need quite as much space. This is a little Gravitas that is one of the sponsors. This was a little 10 by 20, 200 square foot accessory dwelling unit that they designed that we got to build that has a sleeping loft and a full kitchen and or full bathroom rather and a kitchenette and so yeah, that's right, you can. And this is a picture of one of the projects that John Weber did on a day when we were out there helping to build that. How many square feet was that?
720 if you go around the exterior wall.
Oh yeah, see, and that's an interesting with thick wall. The tendency within real estate is you measure square footage by taking a measurement on the outside. Once your walls get thick, the actual difference between interior and exterior matters a lot. And this was a picture at point where he was closer to done on that same project. Build for durability. Think back to that University of Michigan study and imagine if it was extrapolated out. We were not talking about 50 years. We were talking about 75. We were talking about a home that lasted 100 years without people having to get in and do major reconstruction on it. That makes, and I put that up there because I guess I felt like the big pieces of wood felt like durability. It probably is not probably not the greatest photo for that. But flashing details. I mean, durability comes down to a lot of very small details of building well, knowing how to keep bulk water off the house, how to move moisture through. It's a building science issue of just knowing, what are the things that are going to allow a home to last for a long time, and not accumulate moisture, which then accumulates mold and begins to efficient components. There hits a point wherein you've done all you can to the shell And the stuff that you put in there needs to use as little energy as possible. This was back, I put this slide back when CFLs. I mean, now it's LEDs, right? Interesting. Occupancy sensors, light switches that will note when you come in or note that nobody's been in the room for a while and turn it off. You know, there are thermostats that are beginning to learn what our habits are. Obviously, the Energy Star program has been very successful at guiding people towards appliances that are more or less efficient. In the heating and cooling realm, there are things out there now that are well more efficient than what we've seen in the past. And then there hits a point where no matter what, if you're really looking to move towards net zero, towards a home that hasn't just reduced its use but is making up the difference, at some point you have to start making energy. Whether these are some solar hot water, that's hot water also, photovoltaics, John's place, another hot water project. And I had to throw this in. In the end, you have to live in it. And your habits and how you care for the place will affect the durability. Whether the silly things like turn the lights on or off, actually use that fancy thermostat. Those things, absolutely make a difference. And that's something, I mean, not to keep picking on John, but I remember an email I got from some people who moved into the first house that he retrofitted towards net zero, and they're like, we're sure, if our habits were more like John's, this house would totally be net zero at this point. But they were, but they were in a phase where they had a kid and were keeping things, keeping it warm in the space where a person could crawl around. Did I cut it? Oh, and design helps too. If the space is something you love, I mean, this is a little cutout in a countertop for pushing compost into. Design, it's interesting how it dovetails with habits. It's not just doing without. It's like, how do I live? What's going to allow me to live efficiently? What's going to cause me to love this place and care for it and take fewer steps in my life? What's going to cause it to be something that I, we hang out in and enjoy. Anyway, I guess that was my gratuitous throw some fancy photos in there. And I'm going to leave the question, what issues did I miss in that, for as we roll into Q&A or A&Q, whatever, after Mr. Peterson's deal. There. Thank you. I'd bequeath you the magic microphone thing. This.
Just a reminder, if someone in the audience has a question, or you can repeat the question.
Sure. So I'm Jerry Peterson. I have to get my disclaimer out of the way. All the work that I did on my house was on my time, and I'm here tonight on my time. The Division of Building Safety is not a tax-funded agency. All of our monies are collected off of permits and licensing, and so trying to fit the energy part into that when we really don't have a funding source has been kind of a challenge, but something that I really enjoyed doing. John, it's good to see. I don't know if you remember me. I figured out shortly after you finished it. So. So I'm not sure. So, Tim? Wasn't Tim? Oh, Gerald Fleshman.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things on my house was, this is kind of a long story, and it looks good on when we put it all together with pictures, and it really tells the story I want to tell. But you'll see when we go through it that this didn't happen overnight. And so when I first started doing this, really we only had one objective, and that was to, as we did things, could we do things that didn't increase our utilities? So could we add more function to the house and add all of the things that we didn't have without increasing the utility bills? Very simple goal, and that was kind of what started it. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to flip through my notes a little bit. I've got some things I don't want to miss. But when we started it, oh, I forgot to take this off. The remodels, everybody does it for the same reason. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but really what you're doing is trying to get rid of old, dated themes and, add some value to it, but really it's about increasing the function of the house. And so our goals were similar to what most people are looking at when they do remodels. Kitchens and bathrooms sell the home. My house was built in 1973. I bought it in 1977, and I've lived there most of that time. I was a brief period where we leased it out, but I lived there most of the time. This was the interior style, cake pan lights, almost black cabinets, black doors, black trim, popcorn ceilings, you name it, we had it there. And so we thought, well, we only have a limited amount of money, we can't remodel the whole house, we're going to remodel the kitchen. So this is kind of the design I went with. I'm not an interior designer, and even this looks a little dated now, but this was a massive improvement at the time. This thing had a little, kind of a wonky little island that came out, and you literally couldn't get two people into the kitchen at the same time. It was really narrow in there. And if you replace the stove, if you notice it's avocado green, or the refrigerator, it'd have to be lifted out over the counters to even get it out of there. And so it was really dysfunctional. Had that real deep pantry in there, which doesn't work because you can't, everything gets to push the back and you can't see what you're looking for, and so it's just not real practical. It had two coat closets, so there was one on each side of the entryway, which really didn't make a lot of sense, so I just changed some of this stuff up and made it more usable. So we took 12 feet of counter space, turned it to 26, 26 square feet of floor space turned to 58, double islands, microwave range. We didn't have a dishwasher, no way to get it in there. We didn't have a garbage disposal. The refrigerator was on a different plug with something else, so if you plugged the coffee pot and the microwave in at the same time, blink, everything in half the house went off. So, this is kind of what we were trying to do, was really not thinking about all of the energy. In fact, putting all of those items in there, most people would think you're adding to it substantially. But that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to make it functional. So the kitchen was all done, and then this is the view from the dining room looking back into the living room. And we couldn't stand the popcorn ceiling because it was actually in the dining room and kitchen, which is not a good place for popcorn ceilings. So we scraped it all out and decided, well, while we're at it, we're just going to kind of continue. One thing led to another, and we ended up doing everything but the master bedroom in the house. But again, really not trying to do anything with the energy part of it. This is what it looked like after it was finished. This is obviously quite a while later. But what happened, what started to change things was in 2010, when I went to work for the division, I became integral and part of the residential energy programs. And so I had done a lot of weather stripping and weather sealing and stuff in time. I understood ventilation. I actually worked in construction most of my life, but I really didn't know how to connect the dots. I just knew there were some things that were wrong, and this was one of them. And this was pretty common in a lot of houses of that era. They had these kind of chalet-looking things, and this thing ran all the way down right onto the front porch. So any water that came down there would just run out and run onto the front porch. Great design. But there's absolutely no ventilation. This whole thing is a fake that was just built up on top of the house. And so the monster heat in here, and you can see there's no overhang on the windows for shading. And so that came off. And we had to replace the roof. You can see the shingles have gone bad in there. So again, when we already have to do something, you know, should we do other things? I had done a lot of roofs, and so we fixed the ventilation while we were at it. The other problem with the house is it had this monster overhang on it, and this is kind of hard. It's a little deceptive, but it actually comes out straight 4 feet, and then it extends down 3 feet. And I can touch this walking under it. It's that low to the ground. These posts really don't serve any purposes, so there's these posts that kind of infringe on the walk space. And the big thing is it makes it dark. The light can't get in there. And so we took a lot of that overhang back and opened this up to let some light in there. You can see the window shaker in there. This house never had air conditioning from the time it was built. And so we kind of went through different stages of how to try to be comfortable. And this is a 220 window shaker that cost about $150 a month to operate. And then it would only cool the front part of the house, so you had to sleep on the couch because the rest of the house was still 100 degrees. When this was like this in this configuration, I would go up there, and I remember measuring the temperature at over 140 degrees in the attic. And so I took one of the roof vents out and put a attic fan in there, and it would come on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then it would run till midnight. And it finally burned itself out, and I'm not sure it ever really did anything, but it, you know, made a lot of noise. So on the back of the house, this roof actually stopped where the sheeting is at here. So on the roof pitch, it came out 8 inches, but from the house, it was more like this. And so when it would rain, the rain would just roll over the edge and wash down the windows, and they were horribly calcified, and you know, just so many of these things that were designed into it. These rafters are all of the cutoffs off of the front. I just took all that stuff off of the front and put it on the back. And you'll see I have a budget. You know, I'm pretty frugal with what I was doing, but this is kind of a picture that really kind of hurts today because I covered this up. And this was still my biggest mistake, and I sat there and I thermal imaged all of the house afterwards, and I just like, oh, you could fix that. You know, so it's really disappointing, and part of why I put this together was I want people to understand there's a rocket science component to this, but there's also an extremely common sense component to it, and and this is the time to do this stuff. You don't want to tear a house apart just to do the energy upgrade, but when you have the house apart, do everything you can, everything that makes sense. And so this is kind of one of my disappointments. I appreciate the details on the windows. This doesn't look right because I ended up taking all of this back out. I'm fanatical about window installation. It's just a huge part of it, and if I had somebody else do it, I would probably drive them crazy because I'd be right there creasing everything in and making sure that it's sealed. And then I thermal imaged it, everything before I covered it up. So I made sure all the windows were right. But this window height, this is an old aluminum frame window, was actually the same in the living room and in the master bedroom. And so there was these windows weren't here. There's another one over here. And so there was very little light on the back side of the house also. So the house was just very dark inside. And so when we had an opportunity, we put the sliders in, we put the side lights in, and this window actually got replaced with a taller window. We put a window in for the master bedroom and put a window in for a slider into the master. Yes, sir?
I don't want to push on
on a sore subject, but can you point out the things about that section that you covered up, that what it is about it that disappoints you?
So this hole right here still shows up on the thermal imaging. This buckle in here shows up, this void. This didn't even get hit because this is the inside of a wall and they insulate everything from the inside. So this is a practice that we're still trying to get builders to look at today, is don't do this. All of these double studs in there, you don't really need all of that. This can be a lot better. You can see that's overlapped in places, but here's another hole here. And all of this, you know, I did try to move it around when I covered it up, but I didn't take the time to air seal it, and I wouldn't have used this product. I would have used a different product. I've become a big fan of a glass wool product. It's quite a bit greener. It's a lot more efficient. When I do the class on insulation, I take some in a bag and I rub it on my arms when I start my presentation, because that's the beauty of it. It's done at a lower temperature than fiberglass, and so the fibers are smooth and rounded. It's very, very dense, and so it has an excellent sound property to it. And you can't do this. It won't let you buckle it and stuff. It has to go in as you cut it. So that's what I would have done different on it. And it would have been, this is R11, and that product would have been R15. A little bit of a step, and then I probably would have, since I had the entire side of the house off, there really wasn't any reason to not use the continuous insulation. And I had bought it, but I wasn't familiar with how to use it, and it was creating some grief for me around the windows. And at the last moment, I decided not to use it, and I stuck it in the shed. And so this, like I said, this is a mistake that, you know, we learned from. I learned from.
So that stuff that you're talking about that you like to use now, is it rigid?
No, it's a bat, but it comes in a, you know, a roll of R13 or R15, you know, would come in a roll. The same amount of coverage comes in a 4-foot long bag about this thick, and it weighs probably 30 pounds. And it's a glass wool is probably the best description. It's called.
So, I mean, how do you say that it doesn't really buckle if it's the same?
When you fit it in there, you cut everything just 1 inch bigger than the opening that it's going into, and so you kind of tuck the sides in and then push the front in, and it just sits there and it doesn't compress. It stays its full thickness, and so you can't. If you have an outlet right here, if you have an outlet there, you can't cover it. It won't go around it or behind it. You actually have to fit it in there, and so I cut them to fit behind the outlets and stuff. That's one of my. Yes, sir.
Can you define continuous insulation? What's the difference between that and static?
So when I modeled the house later, after I got all the software and really learned how to use it right, what I could have done on this was if I had run R15 and then the continuous insulation R5 over the whole house, it would give me another 20% reduction in my energy bills as it sits today. It was huge. But trying to redo it, to take all the siding off and put it in place today would cost over $5,000. So.
That would be continuous is external to your framing?
Yes, it would be on the outside. And really the OSB is kind of one of those things where do you need it, or is it just creating another problem in the wall? It's still some of the stuff that's being debated is, OSB has excellent air flow properties because energy, in a regular wood, it's like a box of straws. And so it's very easy for the energy to pass through it. And that's why we want to try to avoid these thermal edges. With OSB, the energy actually has to travel down the strands and then jump to the next one, travel down that one. And so it takes a long ways for it to work through OSB. So OSB has some excellent qualities to it, but it also is mold food and subject to moisture. And so, there's always something to consider there in that. So, did I answer your question? So, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, just point or hold. Okay.
And how much thickness would you have added with that continuous insulation?
A ½ inch would have been enough. That's what I had intended. It actually, yeah, it's a ½ inch. It's R5. I don't know that it's the thickness, but it was. Pardon? Okay. So that's what I had bought was R5. That's what I was going to use. And this is inside the house, and you know, we talk about air sealing, and you've seen all of the close-ups of all the caulking and stuff. I probably went through 20 boxes of caulking and doing the stuff that I do now, and all of this would get sealed. I would pull all the insulation out. And there's a reason, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you can't overstress the air seal. And one of the beauties that people don't talk about with air seal, you know, I always want to have another reason besides the end savings. There has to be other things, because it's hard to sell energy efficiency, but it's not hard to sell, you know, if you do this, you'll never have bugs in the house. You know, there's easier ways to prove the point. But this is kind of what you get into. This is insulation that is actually, I don't know how they installed it, but this is, you can reach right through there and touch the siding on the outside of the house. So this is the inside after the outside was done.
And the people online can't see where you're pointing.
I'm sorry.
People online can't see you, so they can't see where you're pointing.
Oh.
Are you filming or just?
Yeah.
Okay.
The recording will only be slides, so if you could kind of drag it down.
Okay. So what happens with any wood is it has defects in it, splits, knots. You know, the carpenters get paid by the square footage and not necessarily by the hour. There's not a lot of incentive to do things precision. The incentive is to do it quickly. And so, you know, you don't have time to sort through the boards and get all the bad ones out. You use what's there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But one of the things that happened in all of this is an aftershock. This is pretty recent. We opened up all of the space into the backyard, and then we looked out there, and it's like, wow, we hadn't planted any trees. It was 17 years into the house, and we hadn't planted any trees, and we watered the yard once in a while, but there was no door to the backyard. You actually had to go out through the kitchen, through the garage, out through the side of the garage, and around the backyard. And then it had fences on both ends. And so it was a lot of space, but it was just really not being used. And so we just kind of kept the curtains closed and don't look back there. When we opened it all up, then that became, you know, wow, we should do something with this. This is cool. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what happened is we used to just set the old back and forth sprinkler out there. With, you know, it was more about getting the biggest coverage instead of watering what needed. So we'd turn the sprinkler on, leave it on for hours and hours, and move it to the other side and run it over there for hours and hours. My neighbors behind me had a dog, and he would bark, and so I'd turn the sprinkler on and make him go somewhere else to bark. But you know, again, as we do one thing, it kind of opens up another thing. And so when we're out there, you know, we noticed that, you know, wow, this is kind of, you know, it's not really that attractive back there. And so we started planting trees, and this is kind of what it looks like today. And same thing on the other side. You know, this was the neighbor's house to the one side. The other one was to the back. And so we put trees in. And so when we were talking about saving money on utilities, it wasn't just electric or gas. We wanted to do it on all of the utilities. And so we had to be pretty cautious about what we were doing with the watering, because we put more stuff in, you take better care of it. Are we using more? Are we using less? And then I came to the conclusion that the only way to cut that water bill, which was exceeding $200 for the 2-month period, was to just start taking out grass. And so we just, 500 square feet minimum each year, it's coming out of there. And I'm still doing it. I'm still working on that part of it. And then, as I said before, you can see this whole thing is just grass all the way to the fence lines. I'd go around to houses that were being taken out. These were grapes that I got from a property that was demoed. I don't know if I would suggest planting sumacs, but you can get them for free down around the river. And then maple trees send up offshoots, and so I was able to get some of those. So really, everything that we were putting back there really didn't have a cost to it. If we bought little trees, we'd wait till they were end of the year. They'd get down to 15%, and then they'd say, well, just take them so we don't have to throw them in the dumpster. And so that's kind of how we did it, and this is what it looks like today. So that sumac turned out to be a pretty tree. There's a little maintenance involved when you plant sumac, so I wouldn't suggest it. But most everything that's there is stuff that we got, from other people and stuff, so it really isn't a big cost to it. And then, because we had this nice area, and to go along with my wanting to remove lawn, there's now about a 12 to 15 foot barrier between all of the fence. So I just have this little putting green kind of lawn out there now. The deck is 650 square feet, but doing that took out 1,000 feet of lawn. And the deck is all reclaimed, salvaged wood, and then I ended up buying some at the auction and stuff, but it was all already been used once, and was able to salvage. I had to buy a few boards. I was shocked because one board was like $24. I'm sitting there, and I only needed 3 to finish the deck. So, and then you can see we put air conditioning in. So, front of the house with the new roof, but I still haven't done anything with the windows. And what I was trying to demonstrate with this is, if you look at the overhang, this is 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see the shade is coming up off the trees as the sun is, as the roof line is going away. So all summer long, these windows all the way across the front of the house, they never do get full sun in there, but they're still nice to look out. So, and then I took, I changed the top of the garage door. I put in a taller door. The garage was totally dark inside. There was no windows in it, and so even in the middle of the day, you go out in the garage, you have to turn the light on. It had one light, and only having one light, it had a 300-watt bulb in it. So incandescent, So I put, lights in the door, and then also on the back side of the garage, when I was redoing the back side of the house, I put windows in the back side. So now you can go out there. It's light, it's bright, you can actually use the garage, and it's a nice space. So this is kind of the watering thing. I played around with different trees out front. We're out there trying to, the neighbor's property is right there, and so trying to get the sprinkler just right. So we just ended up taking all of that out. And as part of taking it out, I put in RV hookups, so when relatives come to stay, they can plug in and have everything right there. So it's a good way. That took out over 1,200 feet of grass doing that. And this is, it's pervious, so it's not city approved yet, but the rain doesn't settle on it, so, or doesn't puddle on it. So what happened after doing all this remodels were somebody in one of the trainings that I attended brought up the idea of, can we effectively remodel old houses? One of the persons there said, my house was built in 1972, you'd be money ahead to tear it down. It's like, wow, I've already been through all of this. I don't think I agree with that. But the point that they were trying to make is, could we do this in a way that made a lot of sense? Could we get significant cost savings out of it just by changing the way that we were doing remodeling? And so that's kind of what got me thinking about, what do we need to do in the house, because we hadn't addressed any of that. So one of the things that happened was, here's, and sorry for the clutter and everything, that's the way we live. here's the new kitchen and stuff, and you can see I've got cardboard taped up in there. This corner of the house was freezing cold. And you walk over there, and it was so cold you'd step back off of it. And so we didn't put very much in the cupboards over there because we didn't want to walk over there in the wintertime. And you can see it's dramatically cold over there. And so I went ahead and thermal imaged the whole house. And then I went outside, and you know, it's funny, I've already lived in this house for close to 30 years at this time. And I'd never had access to a thermal camera. And I went out there. This picture was taken at about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night in February on a cloudy day because I didn't want to have any solar heat on this. And this is the heat coming from the house. And I showed this at a training, and somebody said, wow, that's quite the snow melt system. I've never had to shovel that sidewalk. And this is dirt. So the heat is coming through the foundation, under the dirt, up through the sidewalk, and we're heating the world. And so heating my house. My gas bills in the winter were over $200. And I just thought that was normal. I mean, they'd always been that way. And I started talking to friends of mine. It's like, how much do you pay for gas? It's like, I don't know, $70, $80. Really? So this is what it looks like. I mean, it's pretty harmless looking. Everything looks good. You know? So my wife and I have been married for a long time, over 30 years now. And in September of 2010, she just came up to me one of those days, one of those calm conversations, and she says, because I'd been playing with all the energy toys and testing the house and stuff, and she said, just so you know, I don't plan on spending another winter in this house. And we used to set the thermostat at 68 and still we're paying $200 a month. And it was so uncomfortable in there that the temperature, you could sit there in your chair and watch TV, and within 15 minutes, it would go to 65 to 75. Blanket on, blanket off, blanket on. And then the back bedrooms are just freezing. So in order to keep them freezing back there, we had to keep the whole house warm. And I don't know, we just didn't know any better. But so that was kind of it. She said no more. And so I called around and got a bunch of bids. And I knew what the heating system was supposed to be. And I am an HVAC guy. I went through the apprenticeship and stuff, but we didn't really focus on residential construction. It was mostly industrial and commercial. And so I had, I think, 8 contractors come out, and it was surprising because here I am, I'm the HVAC program manager. Prior to that, I'd spent 10 years as a full-time legislative advisor, and so I knew how these things were supposed to work. And I called the best companies around. You know, and a couple of, you know, smaller companies. And only one company came in, and he walked through the house, and I had I didn't have air conditioning, still didn't, but I had the blower running because I wanted him to hear it. The thing sounded like something was really wrong in the house. And so he walks in, he looks up at the return, and he says, do you mind if I walk through your house? And I said, no, help yourself. He goes, are you guys comfortable in here? No? Are you ever? There's kind of a few weeks in the spring and a few weeks in the fall. Yeah. So he said, well, you know, this system is just, you know, I don't know how to tell you, it's bad. Well, I already knew that. I had already tested. I had a 108,000 BTU furnace, an 1,100 square foot house. I only had 550 CFM of air going through the return. I mean, you could literally cook hot dogs on the grills. The furnace would come on, the cats would run. You know, and the ductwork would cave in all at one time. You know, so you always knew when companies were like, what is that? It's the heating system. So, but they pulled it out. They sized it, and while we were at it, I knew that the crawl space was a disaster under there. This house was built with the joists on top of the foundation, so the what separates the inside of the house from the outside is just a 2x8 on that outside edge. And you could see daylight through it, and there's, you know, it was spider heaven under there. And so I knew that at some point, I didn't know what we were going to do, but I knew we were going to do something different. So I had them put the crawl space ventilator in as part of the system. And then we went back and, you know, trying to figure out what to do. You know, that was the dilemma. We didn't have enough money to fix everything, and everything in the house was original in 1973. So it needed a roof, it needed windows, it needed HVAC, you know, it needed insulated bad. There was just so many things wrong, so we did the HVAC system first. Big mistake. And I'll go into that. After we had the HVAC system in there, it was nice because we'd never had air conditioning before, and so that was pretty cool. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, that last air conditioner was like $150 a month, you know, so we'll set it at 90. You know? But it was coming into winter and stuff, and so I started modeling the house. I was kind of new to the software, and so I started punching all of this stuff in there. And it's like, well, what makes sense and what doesn't? And so I started looking at the insulation, and I thought, well, it's going to cost more to insulate the floor than it is to do the perimeter. And I think that still holds true for most houses. So why not just insulate the perimeter and take care of all the daylight and the bugs and everything else while I'm at it, and we'll see what happens. And then they can shoot all of the return, all the registers and stuff, you know, and hopefully it'll make the floors warm. And if it doesn't, we'll come back and insulate the cold spots in the floor. So after I had all of this arranged and the contractor picked out and everything, I started thinking, well, what about all of the leaks in the house? Because back in 1973, they just cut however big a hole they needed to, and, you know, if it was open to the attic, it really didn't matter. And I only had about this much insulation in there. You could actually see all the tops of the 2x4 trusses. And then it had wind wash. You guys that are in the energy stuff know about that. The vents that are in your soffits, the wind comes up, pressurizes that, and it pushes all the insulation back from the edge. And so in most houses, older houses, you'll have these big circular areas in the ceiling where there's no insulation, and you can pick them up with the thermal camera. And so I already knew that we had to do something with that. And so what I did is decided to go up in the attic and take all of the existing insulation and push it back out the edge. So I put the baffles in and did everything, and I pushed all that insulation back so that all the corners were full, as full as I could get them. And I exposed all the tops of the walls. And when the guy came over to spray foam, I got him to do the entire attic for $150. And it took him 45 minutes. And the house, this is what it looks like afterwards. And so I wasn't really trying to do, I was trying to seal it, is all I was trying to do. And then the other problem that I picked up in the thermal imaging was the cathedral ceilings. And this is another huge problem in the Treasure Valley, and one of our biggest drivers of complaints, not necessarily in a cathedral ceiling, but in bonus rooms where you don't have any backing on the insulation. And so in my house, what they did is they just took bats. I'm sorry, I shouldn't point because they can't see it, but they just took bats and they just stapled it to the outside of this truss. So there's an air gap. The insulation isn't tucked in, and then they didn't cut it, they just folded it out. And so it registered as not even being there. And so when I had a chance to do this, I had them spray these cathedral walls, or these knee walls in the cathedral ceilings. And the other thing, and I've learned since then, so I usually do my apologies right off the bat, but I always seem to get something in the pictures that offends somebody. And this one, I've learned to not cover the wires up. The electricians don't like this. So If you're going to, you know, I could have unstapled them and moved them out of the way and protected them and then stapled them back in. But the other problem on cathedral walls is you have to build this edge up, because if you don't put something up there, the insulation will fall off of this edge and you'll still end up with a cold corner. So we spray the top of them to give a buildup in there to hold the insulation. You can use cardboard. Once it's sprayed, it's very, very durable.
Gary,
Yes?
let's take a little bio break here.
Okay.
Top of the hour, and bring you back in here by 8:10.
Sure.
Snacks are in the back. You get in here, snacks and everything.
Home, you can use it in the attic, in a crawl space, or in the fire, or whatever.
Yes, I can. So in looking through the building code on the foams, it's all of it's fire rated, so it meets the flame smoke index, and it's approved for insulating ductwork and stuff. But there's some concern with the building officials in crawl space. They don't like it in the crawl space. There's no wiring. There's nothing down there, but they have issue with it. And so there is now a couple of manufacturers that make a spray to go over that to protect it, and it's Pepto-Bismol pink. So if you run across it, you'll know what it is. But if you're going to fire rate something like in the crawl space, why wouldn't you just fire rate the entire crawl space? It's not much more expensive than paint. But I tested this myself, and I'm out there with the torch. You can't light it. It does smolder when you have the flame on it, but as soon as you take the flame off, it doesn't. And you can't burn it. I tried taking a 2x4 inside of it and trying to light the 2x4 on fire. It won't light. So
Is that isonine?
this is a product that's called Soy Lock, and it's a soybean-based product. The problem with the spray foams is it's a miracle fix for this type of stuff. There's really no other way to do it. But it does have isocyanates in it, and so you have some off-gassing that you got to take into consideration when you first apply it. It does supposedly 99% of its off-gassing is in the first 24 hours. So we just left the house for a day when they did it. And then we ran the crawl space ventilator, keep that space negative so it couldn't come up into the house while it was curing out. But now that it's done, I like it. I would have actually, I found out later that they could spray the dirt with it because they're using it for hydronics and for under driveways and things like that, sidewalks. They're using this because it's faster than putting the foam, and the foam doesn't stay, let you tape it. And then the other problem with the foam panels is water wicks up through there, and once you get moisture on the concrete, then your heat is lost. So there's some benefit to that, but it's extremely durable. And you can use the staples and stuff to hold the line sets down. But I asked them about crawl space application, and they
These lights are putting out the heat.
So I wanted to back up for a minute because I really can't overstate this. We should never, ever see vertical insulation exposed anywhere in a house. It should never be exposed. All it is a filter for air to move through. And if you take a reading on it, you can see that it doesn't work. And one of the problems that I have with the HVAC, being the program manager, is I'm the one that gets the complaints from consumers. And I have people with brand new houses that call me up and they said, you know, you guys approved this manual J and all of this other stuff, and my house is so uncomfortable in the bonus room we can't use it. And I said, well, it's because it's not named properly. We shouldn't call them bonus rooms. What we should call them is, you know, two-season multiple storage rooms, because that's what they get used for. Yeah. And the problem is that we're not putting backing on the back of it. And I've gotten in trouble with the building officials by telling the HVAC guys, don't give them full rating for these walls. When you're doing the heat load calcs, anything that isn't backed, cut that in half. Then you'll have the system sized to meet the actual load. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like what we should be doing in code, but that's what will actually make those rooms function. So it's just something I can't really overstate is we shouldn't have insulation just hanging out in places of the house. And while we're at it, you know, these are the tops of the walls. Most of the leaks in an older house is not through the outlets and stuff. Yeah, you can feel air through all of that, but it doesn't really add up to a lot. I can show you when I do my testing. Most of the leaks in a house are actually behind the sheetrock because the joints and the sheetrock isn't up tight. You start out with a 3.5-inch board, but as it ages, it shrinks up, and usually they're 3 1/4 after they've been in there for a couple of decades. So that opens up cracks because the sheetrock is tied physically with tape and seams, and so it tends to pull it away from the walls. And if you could blow smoke or watch a thermal imaging, you can see that the air goes underneath the sheetrock and up the walls, which is another case for insulating the interior walls. Or better yet, what we're trying to get people to do is actually just caulk the top plate before they put the sheetrock up. It's fast, it's easy. There's some new products out now that actually you can use a caulking gun, or they actually have a spray that goes along and it just puts a gasket around the top of that. And it's compressible, it's dry, so dirt doesn't stick to it. It's pretty unique. So there's some new stuff coming, and the purpose is to try and gasket that sheetrock up. The other way to do it, obviously, is just to spray the tops of the walls. And while you're at it, everything else that's might leak. So this is what I did. And then later I went back and I'm still kind of tinkering with stuff inside the house. But this is, you can see where the spray foam came down in there because I didn't tape it off. But you see these holes, you know, in the corners, the lights, the plumbing. You know, you can see where water's actually run down the pipe through the attic and down inside of the walls. And, you know, so the new codes say all of this stuff has to be sealed, but how do we fix it in a 20 to 40 to 50-year-old house? We really have to get up in the attic, get the insulation out, and fix it. It's the only way we're going to do it. And so this is me up there in the trusses. This was in December. We had the spray foaming done in December, and for the first time ever in the house, with no insulation in the attic other than out at the edges, the temperature stabilized. And it was just the strangest feeling. It took literally months, because when you used to walk down through the house, hot, cold, you know, as you're walking past rooms. And I'd walk down there and it's like, this doesn't feel right. You know, I'd walk back and do it again. and it was just amazing. My my gas bill for that month was $80, and it was a cold month with no insulation, and it's just amazing. So we did the installation on January 1st, and then finished up with the windows. This is a shot from of one of the exterior windows. This is actually on the front of the house, and you can see that it's, not only is the glass really bad, but it's just there's no seal around anything. This is the frame, and then this is outside of the frame. It's leaking behind the siding and stuff, and we used to tell people you couldn't keep a candle going in the wind inside that house. It was that bad around the windows. You could just feel it. And it's not surprising to go in these older houses and see toilet paper and newspaper and stuff jammed in there, because we didn't always have really good caulk. This is what it looks like now. That window is actually next to it, this one. Didn't really need a slider in the dining room. Didn't really serve any purpose, so I put a nice big view window in there. And people said, well, what does it look like now? I went back to do all the thermal imaging, and so I had my old camera would only take the thermal image, so it was kind of a two-handed thing. You'd snap it with this one, and then you'd take a digital picture, and then if you could line them up, and so I have all of the thermal imaging in another presentation. My card's over here if anybody's interested in it. But I went back and I reshot all of the stuff with the thermal camera. There's nothing there. When you pull the trigger and you look at it later, it's like, what is it? It's all one color. So I know it works. So what was the end result? This is the water use. And one of the things that if you could take this graph back, that water use is clear up here. It's twice what these are, because all during this time I was slowly taking the grass out and doing sprinklers and stuff. And then you notice that it starts to come back up a little bit. Well, what happened was we kind of enjoyed going out in the backyard. It was kind of cool. And so we started planting flowers and vegetables, and we have fruit trees back there. And so we got used to using the outdoor space. And so it was worth a little bit of watering to, have all of this space that we could now enjoy. But it's steadily going down. This is the off season, and it's coming down, and we're still working on it. One of the things that I forgot to mention at the front was when we try to sell energy efficiency to people, and again, please don't be offended, everybody's mind goes to a Prius, and they're got a Suburban parked in the driveway. I can't go from here to here. And there's just that bad image that, energy efficiency means dark homes, and blankets in the winter, and it's just not really the truth. I had 56 square feet of glazing on the back of the house. I put in 120 something. It opens the house up. It lets light in. It makes it a more livable space. It's not about the light and the glass as much as it is about thinking where you're putting it and on what sides of the house and things. Realistically, you talked about diving into the details. I got so into windows at one time. When I went in to order my windows, they just kind of looked at me and said, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And I said, well, can you put me in touch with the manufacturer or something? And all I was asking them about was, really, if you were diving into the details, you would have 4 different types of glazing on your house. You would have different glass for every exposure on your house. And people don't understand that. It's still something we are trying to educate. We have visual transmittance as part of the glass. If you have a view, then you're looking way out into a valley or something far away. That glass needs to be clear. That's the priority, In my house, I want that east sun coming in. It's beautiful in the spring. Kind of warms the house up, makes it really nice in there. On the west house, I don't want that sun coming in because it's hot in the afternoon. I've dealt with that in other ways, but I still have the glass done according to the exposures. So this is the water. The electric, again, if you were to look back prior to 2006, you would see that up quite a bit higher because we found out what CFLs were. And you wouldn't think that light bulbs would make that big of a difference. My mom lives in Shelton, Washington, and she's officially a senior, and you walk into their house and literally every light in the house is on, and they were all incandescents. And she has a good sense home, and it was overheating the house so that it was making the air conditioner come on. I said, what's your utility bills? And she said, oh, they're about $100 a month. And I said, you know, I guess that's not bad, but Shelton is a very inclement climate. You know, there's not a lot of heating and cooling load. And so one Christmas I sent her a whole case of CFLs, and I said, you know, as you run out of light bulbs, put these in. When I went up there last year, they were all CFLs throughout the whole house, and they had dropped their monthly bill by 35% just in lighting. So I knew that, and so we were already changing things out as we were going. One of the things that starts, you know, dropping this down in electricity is I actually added lights. We only had 2 lights in the kitchen. I put 4. We had no lights in the hallway. I put 2. Put 2 more in the living room. I'm doubling everything. We added a dishwasher. We added a garbage disposal. We added a big microwave. Added. And it doesn't show. This was my original goal, was to be able to have all of the functions but not increase the price. If we take an average from, I think I took 2006 and took it to my low year, it is significant. You know, we have achieved that. One of the things that's interesting is we are not energy misers. Just don't really think about it. You know, my wife doesn't even want to think about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, we need to start putting some of these kilowatt things into use, and so that she knows what's going on. And so even though we've been able to do this, it hasn't been with a lot of intent. And so there's obviously some room for improvement there. This is really the big change, was in the gas. And there, again, you can see it hit a low and then it kind of worked back up. My wife would hate it if I talked about her, but she was involved in a real serious car wreck in 2010. And so she didn't go back to work. And so her activities levels kind of slowed down, and so she's cold. And I'm not going to make her turn the heat down, you know. So it's like, you put it where you're comfortable. I'll wear my tank top and keep my So again, you know, you can see the bottom lines when we're out of the season that, you know, we're still improving in that area. So did we hit our 50%? Yeah, pretty easily on that one. So this was something that really told the story. When I went back in and modeled the home on the HERS score, the original house was a 157, and I don't think I have the utility projections on there, but the utility projections were about $1,800 a year, and almost half of that was just the heating and cooling on the original house. Just the heating, because it didn't have cooling. So close to $900 of this was just for heating the house. So it was the biggest, of all of the categories, heating was the single biggest user. The house as it models right now is actually at a 74. I missed a couple items. And again, we did not factor this in when we were doing it. This was just from before and where the house is now. The energy, the heating now is less than $300 or right at $300. So now the heating is secondary. And the cooling, which I didn't believe it, was $53 for the year. I thought, no way. It actually works out. That is one of the weirdest things. That air conditioner doesn't come on until 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and as soon as the sun's off, the AC's off. And the house just doesn't lose heating or cooling. I turned the thermostat off last year when it got down to 0 to see how much heat the house would lose. It loses 1 degree an hour. So we were able to take the setback thermostat and crank that back a couple hours earlier, because by the time we go to bed, the house is where we need it. So, and those are ideal. I mean, setback thermostats are, it's like trying to sell somebody a used an old VCR player. You know, they don't really understand it. And I encourage the heating contractors and, you know, anybody that's in this field, give somebody a one-sheet, simple direction on how to program this thing and do the time changes. They can be extremely complicated, but if you know exactly what you're trying to do, it's just a couple of steps. And so instead of telling them how to program the whole thing, I just tell them, look, this is what you do when the time changes, or if you want it warmer or cooler, so that they're not messing with all the settings. The learning thermostats are huge. I wish I had one. Again, I really, because I'm trying to incorporate this into training, and because I try to do some research and stuff, I probably am too over analytical for my own good, but I've attached a payback to everything. And so some of the things that where people would say, well, this is an obvious choice, I would say it is, but if you look at it from how much it's really going to save you in the payback period, it's not smart to throw away what you have and put the new one in, unless you take the old one and give it to mom and then put the new one in. So there's ways around it. But this is where the house sits now. Oh, and the house meets, you can see down here, the house actually met the 2012 Energy Star and code, except for the continuous insulation on the outside. It's the one requirement that it doesn't meet. So one of the discussions that we're having now is with the code is moving forward into the 2015. Can we use HERS as a model for meeting energy codes in the future? Can we go to more of a performance-based and encourage innovation and new techniques to get where we want to go? And so that's all part of what I'm actively involved in right now. Did we miss something? We did. When we tightened the house up, it got stuffy in there. And, you know, so the previous air test on the house was 7.7 air changes, which is fairly normal for that time frame, and I've done quite a bit of modeling and testing out there, so that wasn't really extra loose. I've tested houses that are 12 plus, and then I've talked to people that have had them up close to 20. I thought, wow, you're going to have a whole lot of candles burning in that house. But what I got it down to was 3.1. So when I retested afterwards, I came up with 3.1, and I thought, well, that's great, because I still haven't done the electrical outlets. I've got a weather stripping under the garage door that you can see that much daylight under, and so I have other work to do, but 3.1, hey, that's good. If I can get it to 3, I'm happy. So I had somebody submitting a HERS with their manual J and stuff, and I thought, well, it's part of the plan review, I should review it. And he had a really low number on a house without alternate energy, and it's like, how did you get here? Because I'm looking at all the components, and you know, he doesn't have anything exceptional in there, so I questioned him on it. And if you ever work with energy raters, they don't like to be questioned on things. So they're kind of stubborn about what they do, which is good. It's good that they're analytical. So I sent it back to him, and I said, hey, you know, something isn't right here. I don't know how you can come up with a 56 without using some site sourced energy. And I said, you know, I worked on my house for a long time, and I can only get it to a 0.77. And he says, well, send me your file, and I'll take a look at it. I sent it over to him. He says, well, you're off here and here. And one of the mistakes I made is I have a really deep crawl space. It's 3 feet to the bottom of the trusses. And it has a transfer grill and a ventilator, so it's considered the same volume as the house. It's conditioned, it's tempered, and I didn't calculate that space in there. If I add that space in there, it brought me down to 1.8. Well, now I'm getting into trouble with ventilation because we don't want to be that tight. And so what happened is the range hood wouldn't work. You know, you'd be boiling water or frying something and you turn the fan on and you go out around it. And so you go and open the window. It's like, So we went through that for a while, and then I started doing some work with fresh air ventilation. This is not new. We were actually doing this stuff back in the late 70s and the 80s. It was a requirement in the city of Boise. In fact, they called it 8 in the 80s. They had to have an 8-inch fresh air intake. Well, they weren't exactly fresh air. All they did is just elbow it out of the cabinet and stubbed it up into the attic and put a piece of window screen over it. Screen got dusty, clogged, so then they'd take the screen off. What people don't realize is that all you did is put a smokestack on your furnace. And so now when it fires up to warm the cabinet up to turn the fan on, all of that heat is just going up the smokestack into the attic. And I have thermal images of this. I shot some video of it. 125 degree temperature heating the attic in the middle of the winter. So I started doing some work on it. I got some people to volunteer houses, and I said, hey, if you run this thing sideways, it won't have the chimney effect. Put a backdraft damper in out here. Just a common regular hood. On the outside it just looks like a dryer vent, but it actually has a grill in there to keep the big bugs out. And then it just runs into the furnace. And I thought, well, one of the problems with 8 in the 80s is it had a damper on it, but it wasn't marked, or it'd say on off. And the homeowner's like, you know, because they don't have a clue what it does. And it's probably good because it really didn't do anything. It was kind of a hurt me, help me kind of a thing. So I started doing some measuring on houses, measuring static pressures and stuff, and I've done a lot of work on this. Anybody that's really interested in any of these other things, please let me know. My cards are over there. And I found that most houses run negative all the time. And so if we put a fresh air duct in there, would it draw air on its own? And it does, but it's a fairly small amounts, about 10 to 15 CFM. So then I would go around and turn all the fans on to see if it would overdraft and pull too much air in. And the size of the pipe and that grill has a limiting factor. So it was more about the size of the pipe than it was trying to damper it. And so I did some quick calculations. And in a hurry to try and meet the new codes, I drafted an amendment that was passed that says this is an acceptable method for dealing with your ventilation air in new houses versus trying to do exhaust fans, and I don't really want to get into all of that. But it's in there now as an option for doing your ventilation in new houses. It's 20 square inches per 1,000 square feet is what it calculates out to. And I tested it under all the different scenarios. What's the beauty of doing things on your own house is you can go out there and test it 105, 0.
I don't understand that calculation you just said. What is this?
Well, the idea was, you know, if somebody used a square duct instead of a round duct, how would they size it? So what I would have preferred, it says, was the 6 inches good up to 1,600 square foot and 8 inches good up to about 2,700 square feet. Typically, you go more than that, you're going to have multiple furnaces. You can put one on each one. Or,
and does that length matter?
No, I did straight pipe, and then I had a 20-foot section of flex, and I tied it all up in pretzels and stuff. And inflow, when you're pulling air in, is not subject to the turbulence and stuff that it is when you're trying to push it. It's like trying to push a rope or pull a rope. And so it didn't really matter. It flowed. And like I said, I did some pretty exhaustive testing. It's like, I think this is close. If we have to modify it later, we can, but this will get us in the ballpark. And then
does that modification cost?
The materials is less than $100, $80 for materials.
My house.
So this really turned out to be the solution because the crawl space ventilator pulled too much air out. And so I relayed it to the furnace. The furnace is set to recirculate 35% of the time. Furnace comes on, crawl space ventilator comes on, keep the pressure negative. Transfer grill in the house, fresh air coming through the furnace being distributed through the house. It works so well that I have less than 1 degree temperature variance in any room, any time of the year. That's how good it works. It's amazing. So
what's causing the house to be negatively pressured?
the house, the stack effect. You know, it's even in the summertime, you still have heat driving up. And then I talked about the leakage behind the drywall. So those are high leaks. And so the house is leaking, but in the new houses, we're sealing everything. We're sealing the bottom plates and all the penetrations, so there's no place for air to come into the new house.
And so how many CFMs do you think you're getting with this?
The 6-inch would flow with just the furnace running about 70. If I had all the other exhaust on it, I could get it up to a little bit over 80. But I've tested this on another house that had a 600 CFM range hood. It would only pull 80. So it has a self-limiting factor to it. And the negative pressures were substantially different between the two houses, and it still pulled 80. So I tested it under a whole bunch of different static pressures to see if it would change it, and it doesn't. So, yes, sir.
So does this basically work because you get turn fans on in other parts of the house, or is it just relying on the stack effect in the house?
So the question was, will the fresh air inlet take care of the other fans and try to neutralize the static pressure even when the furnace is not running? What I found was that the other fans, as you turned them on, it would make up about 10 to 15% of that fan is all it would do, and it will not reduce the static pressure by the same margin. So if the house starts out at -10 static pressure with all of the exhaust running, this will only bring it down to 8.5. So it will not. I think what I'm trying to clarify is that the fresh air intake will not provide makeup air for big exhaust things. It just won't do it. You have to go a different direction on that. We had some problems with houses when they started putting fireplaces in them, and I don't want to be the don't shoot me. This is another one of those apologies. Putting a masonry fireplace in a new energy efficient house is kind of like, you know, driving around in your Prius with the tires half flat and your foot on the brake. It just, but it's a cultural thing, and it's one of those things that we really have to take the time. I can't make that joke in the Wood River Valley, you know, because the realtors come up to me and they said, "You understand that you can't sell a house here if it doesn't have a fireplace in it?" I said, "I do understand that, but do we need 7 fireplaces in there? Can you put maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them with gas?" And I said, "You'll love this." I said, "What are you guys going to do when you run out of wood?" And I'm thinking about deforestation, right? They're thinking wood pile in the backyard. He goes, "We need more wood." So I've got a whole room full of architects and designers, and these are world famous, and in all due respect, I admire architects and designers. That's something I could never do, you know. And so I said, well, you know, what would happen if you took advantage of some of these really cool new LED lights, and instead of doing a fireplace as the central feature of the house, what if you did a lighted waterfall that would reflect the light back into the house? You know? So wouldn't that be cool? It's like, do you do any consulting? But when that's what's wrong, is we have to change that, and I can't sell that by talking about it. I need somebody to do it so I can take pictures of it and show people how cool that would really look. And you see these big waterfalls and subdivisions where they've got it all leveled out. It's just a single plane of water. I mean, inside a house, that would be so cool. The noise would be cool. And they actually make these water walls now that are humidity controlled. So they flow water depending on the humidity, and they have cleaning. The air moves through it and it cleans the air, and then it filters the dirt out of the water. And so there's some cool things coming, but we have to shift people's thinking a little bit.
You mean it's acting as a whole house purification
Yeah,
system?
just a waterfall between two walls. And they're beautiful. They're copper and stainless steel, and they're just, with the lighting in them, they're incredible what it does to the room. So cool stuff.
One more question.
Sure.
Is that ducted into the cold air return? Or?
Yes. And we had, the question was, is the fresh air intake just ducted straight into the return? We want to try to stay away from the heat exchanger at least 3 feet. The amount of air that's coming in from the fresh air blended with the rest of the house, if you did a smoke test on it, you could see it does mix really well. So there was some concerns from the manufacturers about bringing super cold air in from outside and dumping it on the heat exchanger. It doesn't work that way. It tumbles it, and especially if you get on the high side of the filter, on the dirty side. So the cool thing about the fresh air versus just having a window open is it's actually drawn through the filter and dispersed through the whole house. And I've actually done digital readings on all the registers to see if it made a difference with it open or closed, and it doesn't affect inside. So I thought it would all go to the closest register and it would blow out cold air. Doesn't change it. And then I've watched my utility bills. If there is an offset, it's minor, and I'm more than happy to pay it to get the fresh air in there. So I don't know how detailed we want to get into all of this, but I tried to price it out because people said, wow, how much does all of this cost? The problem is that almost everything that I remodel, I had to do it. And so, you know, it was more of doing it right than it was adding expense to it. So really the only expense in this whole thing was the spray foam, which I would have had to have dealt with in some other manner, and the attic insulation, which wasn't up to code, which I had to do anyway. So it's kind of hard to put a number on the cost breakdown other than if I would have done it in a better order, I could have saved a lot of money and actually ended up with a better product. And then we get into that a little bit. The complete remodel was 14 to 20%. That's a huge range, but what I'm taking is the value when it was done versus the value of the house now, which has been kind of adjusted to the downturn. And so from an energy perspective, if somebody wanted to call me up and said, I just want to make my house comfortable. I don't really want to remodel it. I just want to make it comfortable. I think that number is going to come in between 8 and 10%. And if you are uncomfortable in your house, like my wife was, she was ready to move. And so we were going to lose 7% just by moving. And what we've done instead is put in all of this investment into a house that we now don't, we are not inclined to move. We want to live there. It's a nice place to live, and you know it's beautiful outdoors. And she said, you know, I'd like to have a bigger house, but I don't know how we could do this backyard again. And so, you know, we plan on staying there. So it's extremely comfortable. I can't really describe how much their quality of living has improved by what we've done and having the full use of the house and how comfortable and quiet it is in there. She got mad after we finished the insulation because she couldn't hear the mailman drive up out front. She says, well, I don't know when the mailman gets here. Well, you have to start looking at the clock, you know. But, and then obviously, you know, you've seen the house with the gable vent, the roofs and all that. Comparing that to what it is now, obviously all of our value, everything we put into it, we're going to get back. There is no downside to this. In fact, this house would, if I put it on the market, it would not be on there for very long. Somebody would walk in there and say, this is cool, and start showing them the features and stuff. And so that's really the beauty of it. Have we finished? No, I still haven't sealed the outlets and stuff. I'm aiming for a 1.5 on the air change test, and I think that's realistic. So we're still working on that part of it. But what we've learned, what I've learned through this process, and the people that have followed me, is there's really a correct order to it, and it goes back to, you know, what Josh said earlier. If you don't, it is Josh, right? Okay. If we don't do it the right way, we really get it wrong. The wrong part of my house was doing the HVAC first because I sized it to the old house. And so I ended up with a 60,000 BTU furnace and a 2.5 ton AC. And I don't need that. It's twice what I need. And so now I have all the noise, you know, and the air movement and stuff that I don't need. And so now I'm going to have to go back and put an ECM motor in it with another controller to get the airspeed down so I don't have to listen to it when it's in its recirculation mode. High efficiency doesn't always cost extra. This is so true. I went to Home Depot to buy windows and they just said Energy Star. That was all that was on there. It's like, for what climate? And I asked the guy. I said, for what climate? He goes, well, all the same. It's like, no, they're not. I mean, do you have the specs anywhere? And he went and pulled the specs, and they were, I think, 0.34. So I went to one of the glass places in town, and I said, you know, I don't really want to do just standard windows. I want, you know, low E. I want argon. You know, I want this type of frame design and stuff. And what I ended up with was 0.28s and 0.31s for less money delivered than what I could have bought them at Home Depot for, or excuse me, big box store. I'm sorry. So looking a little bit can help, and you know, that's a pretty substantial difference from the 0.34s to 2.8. But then at the same time, when you're modeling things, there's certain things that doesn't come back. So you would expect somebody like me, if you walk in my garage, you would probably look at that furnace and say, wow, 92, all the better you can do. There wasn't any payback to it. The heating bill is so low that it doesn't make any sense to go for those extras. And so sometimes we oversell, and you know, when your total heating bill is $240 a year, it doesn't really do any good to spend the $5,000 extra to buy the Cadillac. It's just, there's just no point to it. And I think that's the thing, another area that we get confused. I'm driving to work, you know, back when I was doing all this, and I'm listening to the radio, and the first ad comes on, and it's like, replace all your drafty windows, you can save 30% of your energy bills. And I'm like, okay, and then the next commercial was one of the heating companies. You need a high efficiency furnace. This could, you know, give you a 40% improvement on your energy bills. Okay, and then I get a card in the mail for a free steak dinner for another product. You know, come listen to our presentation and we'll buy you dinner. You know, you and the wife at Jakers. And, hey, that's styling. You know. And that would save me 30%. It's like, okay, so I just need windows, a furnace, and the magic stuff, and I'm good. I won't have utility bills. It don't work that way. And that's the frustration that I have to deal with ongoing, is because somebody will go out and sell somebody a Cadillac, and then they'll call me up and it's like, this thing doesn't work at all. It doesn't work any better than the last one did. I said, did they do anything in the crawl space? No. Did they go down there? No. You mind if I come over? You know, and then you go down there and you find that the ductwork is totally rotted out and that nothing's even connected under the house. You know, and you just want to scream because this person just paid $8,000 or $11,000 or $13,000, and they didn't get what they paid for. And that just kind of hits me the wrong way, because the certain parts of our communities get targeted for that kind of stuff, and it just really annoys me. And so for the energy people in the room, I really appreciate what you do. We need to be better salesmen with that. The other thing is working with nature. You know, whatever the house has, where it's oriented, is going to mean a lot. And, you know, if you can plant a tree or shade it, or, you know, even on my south wall, I only have 8 feet. Nothing will grow there because it's in between the fence and the house. It's a hot zone. But I found some clump grass that grows 8 feet tall that loves it over there. And so that shades that wall and keeps the sun from penetrating through the wall. That was cheap. That didn't cost me anything. I just went and got it. And, you know, planted one, and then I divvied it up, and so now the whole thing is lined with it. So, yeah, I'm cheap. And then the big thing at the bottom is consumer behavior, which you touched on. And if you've never read anything on Jevons paradox, check into that, read a couple articles on it. The one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to create efficiencies that then get used somewhere else. So if you buy, again, I don't want to offend anybody, if you have a Prius and you used to drive 7,000 miles a year, but now you're getting 40 miles a gallon, so now you drive 20,000 miles a year, what did you say? And that's what we have to be careful of with what we're doing in houses. In my house, the thermostat and my bill controlled the thermostat, and that's what set it to that. Now we don't worry about that. And so if we do this properly, the energy savings is the icing on the cake. What we're trying to sell is comfort and function and, improving, giving value and all of that. And the energy savings just becomes that reward that just gives and gives and gives. My utility bills are between $80 to $100 less a month. That's something that, is very apparent. I'll try and wrap this up real quick. So where are we at now? Well, the next biggest thing would be to replace the washing machine. Just the washer will drop that HRSCO 4 points, and it will almost pay for itself. I factored in the savings over what I expect the washer to last 10 years, and the washer pays for itself in savings. So those are pretty easy things to do. I'm looking at solar thermal because even though my bill is less than $40 a month, it'd be cool if it was 0 or 20. So what can we do now? Solar is at all-time low. There's low interest loans, there's tax incentives, there's just so many reasons to do it, and if it's modeled out, you can see that this stuff will basically pay for itself.
Oh, I've got a quick question. I arrived a little late, so I apologize if this has already been addressed. But as you're looking at sort of the cost-benefits analysis, has there been some sort of an assumption made that utility electric rates are going to do nothing but increase over the future, or is there been assumption that if they're at 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour now, that's going to remain static?
So very, very good question. The question was, are the utility bills going to stay the same when we're doing the modeling? When I have some textbooks from the 80s that showed energy as high as 38 cents, obviously didn't go there. All of those people that were involved in that training have lost their credibility, and so we've lost some good technologies. Passive cooling was one of them that just kind of went away because the cost never went there. So I took the question to the highest source I could find. I talked to PUC, and I talked to the people that do the big power purchase, Simplots and stuff. I said, how do you budget? For, you're a huge energy user. How do you budget? And they said, we allow about a 4.5 increase in the short term. Annually? Yes. And I said, well, if we stay at that rate, could we be at 11 cents, over the next 5 years? If we look at where the power is coming from, and I don't really want to get too much of a tangent, but we're also shutting down some huge power providers in Oregon, Washington, and potentially Wyoming. As those sources come offline, they're going to have to be replaced with more expensive sources. So is 11 cents a realistic number? Yes, it is. And if I had used that in my calculations, you would even have a more dramatic improvement. I'm going to have to kind of go through this pretty quick. Alternate energy should be the last thing because it won't make as much difference before you do all the improvements as it does afterwards. So somebody asked, how do we sell this? How do we sell this to consumers, to contractors? And really it just comes down to 3 things, and I hope I've exhibited part of this tonight. You got to be passionate about this. You have to believe in it, and be able to knock the naysayers off with facts and just say, you know what, I'm a living example. This is my house, I know all of this works because I get to live there. And the second is trust. Don't try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. If we don't know, we don't know. But we can, hopefully by doing these types of activities, we can find out who does know. And so we don't always have to have an answer. It's one of those, can I make some calls and get back to you on it? And then the last thing is education. I will go to any class, anywhere, anytime I have to further my own education, find out who else is involved, what their little niche is or what they're doing, and share my ideas. I have ideas that I haven't used. Will this work? Is it a good concept? And so that's how we sell it. But we can't sell it just as energy efficiency. There's a bigger part of this. If anybody wants any of these things I've done, I have all the testing on the ventilation, the thermal imaging, I'll share my HERS files. Anything that's related to my house is open for anybody to look at. And that was what when I started doing this, that was the promise I made, was it's open. We've had trainings there, and right now I've been in the middle of bathroom remodel, so it wouldn't be a good time to visit. Other than that, the house is open, and if somebody wants me to test something specific, I'm more than happy to do that. My cards are over here, and you've been a very gracious and good audience, and thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. It turns out our microphone technical difficulty was a dead battery, so we're back in business here. Does anybody have any follow-up questions to that great presentation?
You mentioned software, and I assume that some of those graphs were generated with the software that you use. What do you use? What program do you use?
So I'm excuse me. The question was what software we're using for modeling. I'm a HERS rater is what I took my training in. There are other softwares out there. BOPT is one of them. HERS is kind of time intensive and expensive to get, but there are other modeling softwares out there, and I think BOPT is free, if I'm not mistaken. What we're hoping for is an open source. That would be really nice to have an open source modeling system where we could modify it and change it as we figured things out. So I think we're going to see more people wanting to do that. People like me that says, hey, you can have anything I have. We don't want to keep something secret. And then you had a question.
I just had a quick question. Which direction is the front of the house facing?
Okay. My house is east-west, and the front door is on the west side. So I have no windows on the south end. There's some, which I plan to change. In fact, that'll be coming off next year.
What was the insulation that you mentioned?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you prefer?
The spray foam that I used is Soy Lock, is the brand, and it's a soy-based product. From a green perspective, the glass wool that I talked about is probably one of the greenest insulation products out there because it's made from industrial slag. It's made from waste. And so any type of slag wool can be used for that. And it looks earthy. It's greenish, brownish, looks fairly natural. The spray foam, unfortunately, right now is still uses an isocyanate, which is not probably good for you. It does off-gas fairly rapidly. 99% of the off-gassing happens in the first 24 hours. The technology is improving on that, and they're looking at a spray foam that can be activated with carbon dioxide, which will be very cool and very much. So if we can take biomass and use CO2, use another waste product for an activator, then we're getting somewhere. So there's some pretty exciting stuff happening there.
And the base product is soy-based for that spray in?
The stuff that I used, yes.
That's an option. Okay.
And I would encourage people to look at the, I obviously I'm not very well educated on all the green materials, but I do look at everything when I'm using it for trying to make some responsible decisions.
I was going to ask you a question about changes to building code and how that relates to efficiency in our utility bills, and then the realtor in me got the best of me, and I decided I had to ask, have you run any comps to see if your house, after your renovations, you'd be able to sell it and still come out with some profit there, or do you need some time into it before you'll be able to get that?
So taking into consideration the real estate market fluctuations, after it was done, the price on it was a $60,000 improvement. So about $24,000 in for $60,000 improvement. Now there's been some corrections since then, but it's still working its way back up there. Unfortunately, we're locked in by comps in the neighborhood, and so anytime there's market, we're not getting the best houses for comps, and that will improve over the next year. But the house does, I've never been worried about getting my money back. The comparison, when I did all this, I had to have a standard, and so I used the 2006 energy code for my minimums. As it turned out, I was able to meet all of the 2009, and the only thing I couldn't meet on the 2012 was the exterior with the continuous insulation, which I can't resolve. So the house is the equivalent of a Energy Star version 2.5 or 2009 energy codes. And I forgot to tell you guys that, but I like using the energy code as a standard. If we're doing upgrades, let's bring it to a known level, because that's something that the realtors and the homeowners understand. Yes, sir.
Can I do a quick follow-up before we get to Steve? You mentioned that in the next year the comp situation would be changing. Is that because more homes have undergone deep energy retrofits, or what's the condition there?
What's happened in my neighborhood is when the market was down, there were foreclosures and stuff pushing the values down. As the market's coming back up, people are fixing their houses up and painting them and cleaning them up, and so it's bringing them up. My neighborhood is now 40 years old, and so the houses have either been renovated or they haven't, and so there's substantial price differences between it. This house, I've done a lot of modeling around the Treasure Valley. I don't think anybody's going to do it to the level that I did, but I would sure encourage them to.
Yeah, it seems like you've done a lot of stuff. Which ones of those things had the greatest return from an energy perspective?
Thank you. The air sealing, without a doubt. That's the key to the whole thing. If we do nothing else in there, deal with the attic and the crawl. If there's any openings in the crawl, if you go down in most people's crawl spaces, there's holes this big under the tubs where they put the drain assemblies. There's just holes riddled everywhere, cable TV, and that's the beauty of spraying the foundation versus doing the rest of the house. You don't even have to worry about all that. Seal the vents off, spray foam the whole thing, put a ventilator in there. It's tight. If you could do the same thing in the attic, that's going to give you the improvement.
Okay, well, it's after 9. Do we have one more question from Erwin?
A comment there, and that is houses of that vintage, as you pointed out, were extremely leaky, and when you really tighten up the house, there is a risk that you can get in a situation where the flue gases come backwards into the house. And so you do have to be careful to check, we call the combustion appliance zone. Mm-hmm. Check the combustion appliance zone and make sure that when you're sealing it up, you don't end up with a problem there. There are ways to deal with that problem if you do, but you don't want to leave that problem sitting there.
So it's a very good point. And unfortunately, that is really the groundwork for a 4-hour presentation that I've been intricately involved in. As you guys know, we had some deaths in Idaho from CO poisoning, and I was, trying to fix that. We have some ongoing concern right now with new construction. I have a presentation that, a 4-hour presentation I'm doing in 6 areas of the state in the next month, and combustion air and ventilation is kind of the meat of that presentation. So it is something that we're having a lot of trouble with on new homes, but you're right. If somebody is testing the air sealing, you can't ignore the appliances when you're doing it. And hopefully the people that are doing the air sealing and testing are also keeping an eye on that. But unfortunately, in my house, appliances in the garage. That's not always the case. So a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's good to wrap it up on the safety issue. I really appreciate you all coming tonight, and thank you for attending the Sustainable Energy, Sustainable Homes series. I think that Jerry's comments about getting the word out were kind of a good way for him to end it, and I just want to let you know that we'll have the slides as well as a YouTube recording available on the usgbcidaho.org website. So sharing that, or if you know anybody that's undertaking a home energy retrofit or would be interested, a great resource to point them towards. Jerry's got his cards over here on the table. He's another great resource who's available. Josh is available to talk about his experience. So there's a lot of resources, and I think just spreading the word is important. So thank you all for attending, and I think with that we'll wrap.